Well, hey, this is James Riley.
And Beth Riley.
And we've got a really fun edition of Artist Spotlight podcast series. Who do we have?
We got a good one today. We got Randell Kirsch.
Hey, folks. How are you doing?
Man, good to talk to you. How you been spending your time during this crazy global pandemic we've got?
Well, people like me like to do music, and during the pandemic, there's been virtually no live music. I got called to sub in with Mike Love's touring Beach Boys band in November for a couple of outdoor dates in Utah just before that got shut down. The good part is that there's been a lot of time to explore the stuff that is closest to my heart anyway, which is writing songs and doing those. So LuAnn and I, last March, started doing a single song at 7 every night from my Facebook page, wherein we just would do one song that we'd written at 7 o'clock live from that. And my wife, LuAnn, who's a great songwriter and beautiful singer. Shortly after we started, we got our then 10-year-old youngest son in on it because he likes to tell jokes. So he would tell a joke at the beginning, and then we would do our song. And we noticed a sharp uptick in the viewership when he started doing the jokes.
That's great.
That was fun. We still do that. It started out as just a punctuation mark for our day because with the pandemic, everything shut down and we felt kind of rudderless. So we started doing that, and it provided a punctuation mark for us, and it turned out for some other people too.
You were in a band with Jeff Foskett called The Pranks. What can you tell us about that experience?
Well, Jeff and I met at UCSB when we were both teenagers and played in a cover band together. We both loved the Beatles and the British Invasion, so we started out playing those, and the demographic was right for people who were going to school at UCSB and later on in the bars to love that music because that's what they grew up with. Same as us. But one night we were out, we saw a band called The Spoilers, which was kind of a proto-punk band that was also comprised of some students from UCSB, do a set at a place called The Shack in Goleta, California. And they did a whole night of original music, and the place just went off. Everybody was dancing, and it was packed and sweaty and steamy and wonderful. Jeff and I had already been writing some songs, but seeing them do that kind of gave us the boldness to do it ourselves. It just looked like so much fun to do that live. So we went home after seeing them and stayed up all night, and we said, let's write some songs tonight. So we ended up writing 10 songs, and that was the beginning of The Pranks. We started doing original music. In the cover band, Jeff would play guitar and I would play bass. And then Bo Fox on drums. It was a trio for a long time. But when we did original music, we'd switch, and Jeff would play bass, I'd play guitar. Even though there were only 3 of us, everybody sang, so there were lots of harmonies. And then later on, just before Jeff joined the Beach Boys, we added Robbie Sharp on bass.
You guys intertwined so much with Papa Do Run Run, Beach Boys. Tell me first about it, because, man, I grew up just such a huge Jan and Dean fan, still am to this day. Tell me about your experience working with Jan and Dean.
Well, those were great times with Jan and Dean. They were a part of my musical DNA as well. I got that gig because of Jeff. Back when we were doing covers at UCSB, there was a bar we played in. It was a restaurant with a bar in the back. It was a separate building called 1129 on State Street. And Mike Love was in the restaurant portion with a couple of friends having dinner. And on a break, Jeff had gone into the restaurant part to get something to eat. And he spotted Mike, went over to the table and introduced himself, told him that he had a band playing in the other room, invited him back. And Mike said, well, I don't smoke, don't drink, so I think I'll probably stay here. Jeff said, okay, thanks, nice to meet you. And then very cleverly went to the waiter and said, don't let those guys pay their bill. I'll pick it up. So when Mike went to pay the bill and discovered that Jeff had bought them dinner, he said, oh, okay, well, maybe I'll go back and listen to a song, which he did. And then that led to an audition for us backing Mike up on his Looking Back with Love album on the road. And then that led to Jeff subbing in for Carl Wilson in the Beach Boys in late 1981, early 1982, while Carl was doing his solo album, and then they just kept him on when Carl came back. Point being that the next year, in 1983, they called me to sub in for Ed Carter, and the Jan and Dean was kind of at the helm at that point, heard about me through that, and I went right from the Beach Boys tour to a Jan and Dean tour and stayed with them for a few years. But the Jan and Dean thing was so much fun. There are a lot of good stories about that. Dean was always up for an adventure, and we were playing in Kitchener, Ontario one time, and we were all up late, bored, and there was a water park right next to the hotel in which we were staying. And there were some lights, like shining on the water slide and all that kind of security-wise. But we decided as a group, John Cowsill, me, Chris Farmer, Phil Bardwell, and Dean, to invade the water park. So we hopped the fence and started exploring, and there was one part in the water slide where the top was open and the light was shining, and I said, John, keep your butt down. You're going to make shadows. They're going to see us. And of course, he stuck his butt way up higher. We were on all fours climbing up this thing and waggled it around, made a big show of it. Sure enough, the security guard came and caught us, but it ended well. He understood that we were up to not too much no good, because we were all laughing our butts off. So he didn't even call the police or anything. He just asked us politely to leave.
Jan and Dean sing on one of your tunes, Roll the Window Down, and that's significant, too. It was that like the last time they had sung on a song, or am I getting that correct?
It was. That was the last cut that they appeared on, both singing, both together.
Yeah.
I recorded them separately. I took the recording equipment over to Jan's house and then over to Dean's house and had them do their parts. And I was so grateful that they were, willing to do that for me. And I thought they sounded great doing it. That was the last time that they appeared on a cut together, unfortunately, because Jan was still writing and Dean was still singing great. And
we're going to bring your wife back up again. Show of Hands was a group that you were in with your wife and Chris Hickey, and you guys had a release on IRS Records in 1988, and a second album was recorded a couple of years later and stayed unreleased until 2013. What was it like being in that trio?
I had just a small hit with Jane Weedland doing a song called Blue Kiss that we'd written together, and that led to me getting signed to IRS as a solo artist, but I never wanted to be a solo artist. I always thought it was cooler to be in a band like the Beatles where you had more than one writer, more than one singer. I loved the trio format from my days with the Pranks. We had a band called What I Want, which was 5 voices and an acoustic guitar. That was the concept. Tons of harmonies and only one acoustic guitar accompanying them. And that was really fun. That was with Dee Dee Howard and a great guitarist named Pat Milliken, who was underused as a guitarist in that band because I played guitar in it, but he sang. So we had all these 5-part harmonies with one acoustic guitar. That was the approach, and it was really, really fun. But that kind of boiled down to Chris and LuAnn and I, and Chris was an original member of the Spoilers band that I mentioned earlier that was so inspiring to us. And he did 2 fine solo records on vinyl before then that LuAnn and I were big fans of. So we invited him to be in What I Want, and then when that boiled down to a trio, Show of Hands, I had signed the deal with IRS as a solo artist, but I told them, I've got this band together with LuAnn Olson and Chris Hickey. Why don't you let us audition, to make a band record deal out of it? And so we went into the stairwell at, I think it was the MCA building or the Universal building in Hollywood because it had good reverb. And the brass from IRS came and listened to us sing a couple of songs acoustically in the stairwell. And they liked what they heard, so they signed us to do a group album. We brought David Kirschenbaum on board as a producer, and he had just done the Tracy Chapman record, which was a big success. We were poised for greatness and went on the road with the Indigo Girls and the Go-Betweens and Loudon Wainwright III all over the United States and Canada, and we even went to China for part of that tour. But we found that in America, in most of the towns that we went to, there were no records in the stores. So we'd have a good show. People would try to go buy the record, and then they weren't able to do that. So we got in touch with the record company and said, hey, give us some records. We'll sell them out of the trunk, which is what everybody does nowadays. But it wasn't okay back then because the record companies had to keep their relationships sound with the retailers and not make them mad. In any case, the touring went well, and we had great shows, and it was just a blast to be on the road all together. But we didn't sell many records from it. I'll give it over to LuAnn to give some perspective on that.
Well, we toured out of a car. It was a Ford Taurus, and we called it the Ford Tour Us.
Yeah.
The shows were super fun because we were opening for the Indigo Girls, and at that time, it was quite small, so we'd be sharing a backstage, and it was just very intimate and really had a lot of camaraderie that I loved, but we were, sleeping in cheap hotels. The harmonies, I guess, like what was inspiring about the music was that there were no bells and whistles. The Indigo Girls were playing with just 2 guitars, and vocals, and we were playing with just 2 guitars and vocals, and once in a while an electric bass maybe. But just the purity of the music, it was all about the songs and the voices, cutting out all the extraneous things that can distract you. You can have something we might call like ear candy, like, when you just can't help but move to a song, but you realize the lyrics are saying nothing and the vocals are really great, but they don't touch your soul. I guess what I liked about that period was the purity of the music. and singing harmonies. It's just super fun.
In a lot of ways, you guys were ahead of your time, I feel like, before, Americana became such a thing. I mean, you guys were out there doing it, and it's what these artists are doing now. Luckily for the people now, they have Spotify and other digital things. So if people want to find out music about the artists that they're seeing, they can kind of do it immediately. And unfortunately, when you guys didn't have product in stores, it sort of hurt a little bit. So, but yeah, and I think in a lot of ways, you guys may be ahead of your time there.
We felt like that a lot, like that we would do something and then it was like the next big thing, and we thought, how did we miss that?
Yeah.
We were doing that a year ago, but I guess that's just sour grapes. So when, Randell said, here, do you want to talk about it? It's like, which part do you talk about? You talk about the part that was great or the part that was, frustrating and dream killing and the politics of when your band feels like a marriage that's breaking up? Or it's like most things in life, there's a yin and a yang, and both parts are real and both parts are true. I feel now like I am a much better writer. I write more of the truth, and back then it's hard to listen to because I just feel like that wasn't really what I should have been doing, just trying too hard to do what I thought I was supposed to be doing rather than telling the truth. It's
amazing, though, that everything we do kind of leads to other things. You guys, you and Randell in particular, have such a great connection and writing some songs and still doing the stuff now, especially in light of the pandemic when you can't get out and perform, but you're able to perform in a different way, which is pretty cool.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been, I was just thinking, we're coming up on a year. We never really envisioned it going this far into the future. And I thought, will we stop at a year? And then I thought, why would we? This is such a great way to try and connect and to make sure that we keep music at the forefront of our lives, because, you can get so busy and distracted. If you don't have to play at 7, you're not going to play.
Yeah.
Like sometimes we've been really distracted or like out of range and we physically can't, or we're really stressed and you don't always feel like you can put on a show because maybe you've had a really hard day. I go, no, we've got to do it, because some people, they frame their day around that. They look forward to that. That's how they relax in the evening. That's what they do before they go to bed, or they watch it like when they have tea in the morning. And it's so rewarding to feel like you get to go into people's homes and actually be part of their lives and have it mean something to them. Sometimes I struggle with song choices because this has been such a hard time, and part of what writing does for me is catharsis about all the things that are going wrong. So I write a lot of more dystopic songs. And I go, I don't think I really want to play that for Song at 7, because a lot of times I just feel like that's not what people want to hear right now. They're living it. They don't need to have me drag them through it. So I go, I'll record those for me, but I'm not sure that's what I need to put out there right now. People are having a hard enough time.
Yeah.
So we try to stay honest, but just not quite so nihilistic, I guess.
It's been great hearing some perspective from your end as well, too, about this, and certainly about the music you guys have done in the past and the things that you're doing currently.
Well, thank you. It's nice that you care.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to acknowledge a connection. LuAnn said, about the dark and the light and both sides being true, the good times and the bad times.
Yeah.
I was just thinking one of our favorite bands, the Beach Boys, presented that also. There are songs like In My Room, and then there are songs like Fun, Fun, Fun. They weren't afraid to represent introspective or shadow side.
You kind of have to dig into it a little bit, and then you realize they were really kind of blazing a trail with that.
Very true. AM radio was populated by upbeat, happy songs for the most part, But In My Room was a hit, right?
Sure, absolutely.
And I also just wanted to speak to what you said about, playing her truth and our truth. Working as a sideman for the Beach Boys and Jan and Dean was certainly an honor and a really good time. But it was recreating something that somebody else already did the best that it possibly could have been done. They were the creators of that.
Yeah.
Very fulfilling to be able to go out and do something that was original and just the unique gift that we could bring. No one else could do what the Beach Boys did. No one else could do what Show Bands did, or that LuAnn does on her own, or I do on my own. Everybody's got a gift like that. It's great to have an opportunity to share that with other people, because some people actually get something out of it.
You've played and recorded with so many different people in the studio, with Bill Lloyd, Indigo Girls, Brian Wilson, John Anderson. I mean, how do you prepare for the different needs that you're called upon for each project?
A lot of those names, like John Anderson, Steve Winwood, and Brian too. A lot of those guys on that list were involved in a record called, I think it's called Grief Never Dies, and I think it was done after the tsunami.
Okay.
Somebody in England wrote a song and they made a record out of that. And there's this huge list of really big superstars. And Jeff and I were lucky enough to sing on that record as well. We Skyped or FaceTimed, whatever it was, with Stevie Winwood in the studio when we were recording. But, you know, everybody recorded separately and weren't in the studio at the same time. So Brian recorded on his own and John Anderson on his own. So I've never met John Anderson, even though I'm on a record with him.
Yeah.
And only met Steve Winwood, on screen over the internet. So some of it works like that. But as far as preparing, you say?
Yeah.
I guess I've been preparing since I was 7. That's when I started playing guitar and singing. I mean, I did my first on-stage appearance was when I was 7. I guess, you know, if you're doing something that you really love, then you're constantly preparing for whatever life throws your way, you know, as an opportunity to do that thing. I grew up in Fresno listening to the Beach Boys, and I certainly wasn't in Hollywood or involved with the scene in any way, shape, or form. So there's still a part of my mind that's still just pure fan, and looking at people like the Beach Boys and the Beatles and the Stones as just like gods, you know, like, oh my gosh, you know, I could never, ever be like them or do anything like them. But, you know, the truth is that they were gifted, smart people that enjoyed a certain set of circumstances, and there are a lot of really gifted, smart people that didn't enjoy the same amount of success. Do you know who Judy Sill is from the early 70s?
It doesn't ring a bell, I don't think.
Judy is spelled Judee. Look up a song called The Kiss on YouTube by Judy Sill. And there's also Nick Drake.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There are all kinds of people who were really, really talented that didn't hit that worldwide market that some of the bands we love do. But I sure am glad they did, because they were such a rich resource to form musical DNA out of. It was flavor of the day back in the 60s, but the quality was up. You know, Buffalo Springfield and the Byrds and all these excellent bands, just one after the other every week, putting out beautiful songs. Animals, unbelievable.
It was a great time period.
I got off track there, but the preparation for going in and recording with any of those guys is, I guess, sharing their musical DNA. You know, I mean, what they did influenced me so greatly. It's just part of my musical taste and my musical expression. So that was good preparation for going in and playing with them.
Now, you've written a lot of songs, but you had some that were actually featured on the sitcom Full House. What was that like for you?
That was a bit of luck. I met John Stamos at a Beach Boys concert somewhere in the early 80s. And like I did to everyone back then, it's done differently these days, but I always had a cassette in my pocket of my songs, and I would give them to anyone who had anything to do with the music business or remotely related to music. I even gave one on Vincent Price, to Vincent Price on a plane one time when I was on the road with Jan and Dean. And the band guys saw me do that and just have, you know, soundly made fun of me for that ever since, for good reason, you know, because what on earth is Vincent Price going to do with the tape? John, we met at the Beach Boys concert. I think it was in Orange County. And then everybody was going to go to a Maryland crab house there in Orange County and have crabs after the show. So I was driving in my car toward the crab place. And then at a stoplight, John drives up next to me with his window rolled down. And he had, I think, Something on the Order of Love or one of my songs blasting out of his stereo. He was listening. He actually listened to the cassette I gave him. And he liked it. He was bopping to it. So we talked about that at dinner. And he had an interest in music and he liked to write songs and sing. So we just kind of became buddies on that basis. He used me and some of the other Beach Boy band guys on Full House as, you know, as Jesse and the Rippers members or to sing a cappella sometimes. And through that, just, you know, he needed a couple of songs to sing to his girlfriend, romantic songs. LuAnn was talking about, you know, singing Our Truth. She and I courted by writing love songs to one another. And so we had this collection of love songs, and John knew about them because they were on the cassette. And so he used a couple of those, and then one that was called Caitlin's Crying. When Chris Hickey's first child was born, I wrote a song for her. Her name was Caitlin, but they changed the word to Michelle Smiling, and Gary Griffin wrote a beautiful orchestral part in the middle. So they kind of adapted that song for use on Full House. And the other one was For the Times and I Belong to You, I think, which were both love songs that I wrote to LuAnn while we were recording. So the part I like about that is that there was some truth to it. They were actually written for somebody from the heart, and something about that resonated enough for John to want to use them on the show.
And it's cool, years later playing in the Beach Boys and John joining sometimes too, which is pretty cool.
Oh, that's always good times because we're both rabid Beach Boys fans.
Sure.
We recently did an interview with Christian Love, who is the son of Mike Love, as you know. You guys have done some collaboration. What's it like working with Christian Love?
Oh, it's a joy. We started working together more when we were on the road together in his dad Mike's band, because when you're on the road, how long is a show? Anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours long. So that leaves at least 21 hours of the day where you're not doing work. You have a sound check in there, but there's a lot of time to fill up. And so he and I filled it up by coming up with songs and recording them. And that was just a good way to pass the time. Christian's a really, really talented guy. He's a high-level volleyball player. He's actually won money at tournaments playing volleyball. He's a great athlete. So he would be very patient with those rest of us in the band that weren't such great athletes. And he'd bring a volleyball out on the road, and we'd find a court and play sand volleyball or beach volleyball on the occasions that we were close to a beach, and give us pointers. It was really fun being on the road with Christian.
Do you have a favorite song that you guys have done together?
Man, I wish I had a good enough memory. A lot of the songs we did were ballads.
Yeah.
Dang it, I wish I could think of a song.
We were listening to Lost and Found earlier.
Yeah, that's one we did. And I think that's out on the internet available.
I love a project that you were a part of a few years back, the Bamboo Trading Company that David Beard spearheaded. A lot of great people on there, Philip Bardowell, Dean Torrance, I think Gary Griffin's on there too. And
oh, yeah.
Any talk of doing another project? Before
Gary moved to Ohio, there was some talk about that. That turned out to be a really fun record to do, but it was a complete surprise to me. Gary called me up and said, "I want you to come and sing." I said, "Okay, great. What time shall I be there?" And I knew nothing else, just that he wanted me to come to the studio and sing, which was, not an uncommon occurrence over the years. You go to Gary's studio and sing some harmonies on somebody's song. So we got there. I said, "Okay, play me the song. Where do you want the harmonies?" And he goes, "No, they want you to sing lead." I said, "What?" And that's when I found out about the Bamboo Trading Company. But there were some really talented guys involved with that. Matt Jardine was in on it.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But that was a fun record to do. One of the songs was featured in a film. It was fun recording it because we did a lot of the vocals all together in the studio, singing at the same time, which is always the most fun way to do that.
It's almost a different thing now to actually get into a studio live with everybody and doing something.
Well, I've been trying to find a studio where I could even do that, because I'm definitely horny to get in the studio with other musicians playing and singing at the same time. That's one of the experiences we had with David Kirschenbaum, is he was using a lot of Tracy Chapman's band to do the record with us at his studio, but and it's record the track and then everybody sings separately. But there was one song that we all gathered around the microphone, just LuAnn and Chris and I, to sing a cappella on the record. David Kirschenbaum just lit up. He had a blast doing that because he was old enough to have come from the days when that's the way records were done before there were multi-track machines. And it was increasingly rare to have everybody doing everything all at the same time, because there's chemistry when you do that.
Oh, sure.
It's like playing on a sports team. You can't play football by yourself. We were talking earlier about records in stores. The first Show of Hands record is still not available. You can't find it online. It doesn't exist as a purchasable product. And I think the reason is that there is a folk duo named Show of Hands out of England that came into being after our Show of Hands band did, but they continued on. They didn't break up, and they continued to make records, and they're still active today because they probably have the legal rights to the name at this point. I think that's why whoever owns the record now, doesn't put it up on the internet.
I have a copy of it on vinyl I'm looking at over here, but I got that a long time ago.
Yeah. It's interesting that record came out just when the digital age was starting, so that was released on vinyl, cassette, and CD.
Yeah.
But doesn't exist yet as an MP3.
Isn't it crazy?
Yeah, I think it is crazy. I mean, this digital revolution that we're living through is every bit as massive and game-changing as the Industrial Revolution.
Is there an artist that you wish you could work with that you maybe haven't had the chance to work with yet?
Phoebe Bridgers. LuAnn and I were leaving to go hear The War on Drugs at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles a few years ago. And I noticed that there was an opening act. Her name was Phoebe Bridgers. So I went to YouTube and looked up the first song I saw, which was Motion Sickness. And I listened to the first line, shut the computer, and said, come on, let's go, get in the car. We got to get there in time for the opening act, which turned out to be very worthwhile. And I've told everyone that will listen about Phoebe Bridgers ever since then. It turns out that she's having the success she deserves. And I didn't know this at the time, but a friend of mine who produced a song of mine for a movie back in the 80s named Tony Berg is her producer.
Oh, wow.
And does a fantastic job at everything he does, but an especially good job on that record. And I've met Phoebe a couple of times, but just not even to have a conversation. Just I would take my daughter to see her at a concert and just randomly fall into step with her as she was walking from point A to point B through the lobby. Oh, hello. What's your name? You know, but not enough to have a conversation. Anyway, she is someone that I would love to work with because I love her songwriting and I love her voice.
Beth and I always talk about, wishing we had a time machine, could go back to, 5 years ago or whatever.
Oh, are you going to, if Time Machine is part of canon in this comic book, then I've got Sam Cooke. I got to work with Roger McGuinn, but I'd rather work with all of the Byrds, I think.
Yeah. Would you go back to that time period of the maybe late 60s or something?
I would say even starting mid-60s. I mean, a lot of our cultural tent stakes are getting pulled up all around us during this period of time passing away. I look at the age difference between them and I'm just astonished at how much difference 5 or 10 years can make when you're a little kid. If I was 10... Mike Love he would have been 25 when I was 10, but there are other people like Stevie Winwood was probably 5 years, not very much of an age difference, but when you haven't even reached adolescence and they're making hit records when they're 15, that's a huge difference.
Oh, sure.
But when you're 65 and you see that they're 70, you're just going, man, I wish I'd been a couple years older back then.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have done me much good being in Fresno, but.
If you had to pick 3 to 5 albums to take with you to a desert island, which 3 to 5 albums would you take? I know they could change every day, but mine, I would keep one consistent, but the other 4 would change.
Another impossible question, but Blind Faith by Blind Faith, Stranger in the Alps by Phoebe Bridgers, any of the Beatle records prior to the White Album and after the White Album. I would want to put together my own collection of Beach Boys songs that was an album's worth long because each one of their records contained gems. But even, Pet Sounds, I don't want to sit through all of Pet Sounds. I want to pick Wouldn't It Be Nice and, my favorites off of there. I would compile a Beach Boys record to take.
If only anybody would have ever done a Beach Boys compilation. There's a couple of them out there, right?
You're right.
But the Randell Kirsch compilation of
there's some great compilations. Sounds of Summer is a great compilation.
That's true, yeah.
And Warmth of the Sun is a great compilation. I might take Alison Krauss, Forget About It, Buffalo Springfield, Last Time Around.
Okay.
And any of the Neil Young albums up through Harvest.
Are you a Jackson Browne fan or no? I was waiting on a Jackson Browne album.
Oh my gosh. Beth, you really hit a button there. Thank you for reminding me. That's definitely in the top 5.
He's in my top 2.
What's your Desert Island Jackson Browne record?
Running on Empty. I like that one.
We just talked to Susie Quattro yesterday, and she named that album too.
Yeah.
I would probably pick an earlier record from him.
Yeah. He doesn't have a bad one.
Well, I agree with that. And he's so underrated as a singer. He's just a fantastic singer. I got to share a microphone with him on one of the shows we did. The Indigo Girls would call everybody up to do, what's it called? Come on, people, now smile on your brother. Everybody get together.
Yeah.
By the Youngbloods. That would be a group sing-along at the end of any of their shows. But yeah, thank you, Beth. I'm a big Jackson Browne fan. That would be on the list.
I'm always happy to help out Jackson. I've never met him, but I feel like I know him.
I see him around every now and again, and until lately, he was never very talkative. But last time I was at a party that he was attending, we had a good conversation. It's the first time I've ever talked to him for that length of time.
Was that the same one Christian was at with Jeff Franklin? Or
it was at his house, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, Christian
Christian was
telling,
there.
Yeah, he was telling us that story. I was like, what the? You didn't get a picture? No. I'm like, come on now.
What's on the horizon, do you think, for you?
LuAnn and I have a long-standing goal of collecting the songs that we've written over the years into album forms and getting them available to the public in one form or another, because at this stage of our lives, it's curation and creation. We're still writing songs. LuAnn writes more songs than I do. She's very prolific. But since we started doing Song at 7, I think I have 32 or 33 new songs. They're just sitting, without anybody being able to hear them unless we've done them on Song at 7 and you go to look for them. So the longstanding goal is to curate that backlog of songs that we have and put them together thematically into groups and get them out there either just digitally or maybe in a physical form.
Yeah.
I like the physical form because it lasts. I think digital stuff is very fragile. It can go away very easily. And so I like CDs and I like LPs because they last.
Sure.
I'd like to leave something behind. Do you guys have time for me to tell you a story about a Show of Hands fan?
Oh, sure.
It's a connection to Jan and Dean.
Okay.
LuAnn and I sometimes would travel together for sections of a Beach Boys tour. And one of those was up to Reno, which is semi-local. It's in California. And so at that time, they were selling tickets for kind of a pre-show VIP, attend the sound check, behind-the-scenes look to whoever wanted to buy them. We did our usual sound check, and there was a small group of people who had bought those tickets, and they were just being ushered out when I hear this voice go, "Randell, Randell!" And then just before the group had left and the person who was ushering them out couldn't stop this person, she ran toward the stage, waving her arms, and said, "Randell, Randell, it's me, Christy Robinson. I'm your biggest fan. I'm your biggest Show of Hands fan." And so I jumped down off the stage and we introduced ourselves to each other, and she was breathless, just talking about Show of Hands, how much she loved them. I said, "Well, if you love Show of Hands, LuAnn's right over there." And she freaked out again and ran over to where LuAnn was, and we talked for a good deal, and it turns out that there was a connection with Jan and Dean, with this wonderful woman, Christy Robinson, because when she was 10 years old, and this is 30 years hence, she had come up on stage and I had played air guitar with her, where I put the guitar around her neck and I'm actually playing the guitar, but she is, kind of dancing and playing air guitar while I'm actually doing the notes.
Yeah.
We used to do that every show with a kid from the audience, and she was the kid from the audience that night.
Oh, wow.
And I hope I'm not speaking out of school here with Christy, but her parents were very specific in what they would allow her to listen to. And the only music, literally, that she was allowed to listen to as a kid was the Beach Boys and Jan and Dean. But it just so happens that the Show of Hands record had come out, and it was new, and I was still doing sideman work, when we weren't touring with the Show of Hands band. And I had a CD, and I gave it to her. And it was the first music that she had heard outside of the Beach Boys and Jan and Dean catalog, and it blew her mind.
Wow.
She absolutely loved it. I mean, she was a little kid. She was just turned 10, and she didn't even know that there was other music out there. And so she listened to it over and over and over again. And then when she was old enough, she walked down to the record store and showed them the CD and said, "Do you have any more music like this?" And it opened up a whole world to her musically. And she's super passionate about music. She's a wonderful, wonderful person. But I just wanted you to tell that story about how music opens doors that words cannot, and how the connections exist, just everywhere for people who love music.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we're still in touch. She's there for every Song at 7. Hi, Christy, if you're listening.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Randell, really appreciate you spending the time. Tell LuAnn thank you, too. It's really great to catch up on some of the stuff you've done in the past, some of the stuff you're doing now, and stuff you want to do.
And make sure to tell Finn to keep up with the jokes.
I will. He's shy about it sometimes, but other times he just is spot on. Sometimes we even have 3 generations worth. LuAnn's dad will tell a joke, then LuAnn will tell a joke, and then Finn will tell a joke. 3 generations of jokes. That's not quite alliteration, but close.
That's awesome.
I appreciate you guys and your involvement with music and keeping music alive and out in front of the people that can benefit from it, and appreciate it.